The views and opinions expressed here are those of the guests and are not the official position of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
One of the most remarkable aspects of The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is its unique history. Throughout the world, great stories from faithful church members have only added to that history. This program shares some of these incredible stories of faith, perseverance, hope, and inspiration. You're listening to Legacy. I'm your host, Nathan Wright. Historical artifacts and documents give us a window into the past, but somebody who really cares and knows what they're doing must do something to preserve these treasures. We have with us today Chris McAfee, Jennifer Hadley, Russ Furman, and Larry Montgomery from the Church History Department. Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Please, let's go around and you can introduce yourselves and give us a kind of an overview of what you do in the History Department.
I'm Chris McAfee. I'm a book and paper conservator, which means I repair broken books, stabilize documents that are fragile so that they can be handled and viewed by historians or patrons of the Church History Library.
Very good. Jennifer.
I'm Jennifer Hadley, and I'm the textile conservator at in the Church History Department. So I do kind of similar to what Chris was saying, only with textiles, and cleaning, stabilizing, repairing, so that they can be on exhibit. Probably one difference would be that my work doesn't get handed around to patrons, but it does go on display so people can see it.
Excellent. Russ.
I'm Russ Furman, and I'm the photograph conservator. I take care of all of the photographs in the collection, everything from the very earliest to the very latest, copy and get ready for exhibit if they need to be, or repair or stabilize.
Very good. And Larry.
I'm Larry Montgomery. I'm the furniture conservator and wood artifacts conservator.
Good. Thank you very much. I just have to wonder how a person decides to conserve things, historical things. Tell me a little bit of how you got into this.
I was an art major at BYU and took a bookbinding class and really fell in love with it, so decided to go to graduate school to learn what we call the book arts, which included letterpress printing with movable type. We made paper by hand. We marbled paper. And while I was in grad school, we had a minor flood in our apartment. It was a very slow leak in our water heater, and we didn't notice it for several days. And in our bedroom closet, I had several of my personal documents, including my mission memoirs, things like that, and they were complete. By the time I found them, they were completely soaked, and a lot of the ink had bled, and I began wondering what I could do to repair these, and not only that, what I could do to help others maintain theirs. And my teacher at the time gave me an opportunity for credit to do an internship in conservation. So I jumped at the chance and ended up doing a 6-week internship at the University of Cincinnati libraries, learning how to turn my talent of making books into a talent of repairing books.
Based on a flood.
Based on a flood, yeah.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Jennifer.
Well, I don't really know how I got into conservation other than, honestly, I really feel like the Lord led me there. I've always been interested in history and material culture, and for some reason I was always interested in clothing and sewing and that kind of thing too. And after I finished my bachelor's degree, I worked for a year and decided there was nothing that I wanted to do with that degree. And so I thought, well, I'll just go back to school and do something I like. And so I went into textile history and got my master's. And I was halfway, 3/4 of the way through that before it occurred to me that people do conservation work with textiles. And I thought, well, that's perfect. That's just what I want to do. And so I ended up getting an internship at the Church History Museum, and here I am.
Very good.
I started in photography in high school. Got interested in it, worked on the yearbook, was decided to go into the Navy. I served for 4 years on an aircraft carrier as a photographer. So I've been involved in this for 47 years. Went into police work, decided that wasn't the best place for me. Wasn't really the orientation that I wanted. Worked for a photo dealer. Then came to work for the church. I feel like I was led here. It was quite remarkable how I got hired, and then I looked around until somebody said you don't belong developing microfilm. You belong doing this other thing, and so I've been in the conservation department for about 5 years now, and I never intend to retire. I'm going to stay there forever.
Very good.
I suppose my interest started in high school, wood shop. So from there, I have history of various cabinet shops in my younger days, and eventually evolved into furniture works, and people bringing me artifacts, antique furniture to repair, and out of my home and my shop at home, and it just kind of went on from there. I've done some exhibit work, and that's what brought me to the museum, building exhibits for a exhibit company, and consequently it happened to work into a job there as exhibit builder, and then with furniture that the church has that I on occasion would repair and conserve or preserve. Eventually, that worked into a job with wooden artifact conservation.
Very good. We know the how and why now, so let's talk a little bit about the what. What it is that you've been working on, something that would be familiar, I think, that we could maybe understand a little bit about.
I can tell you about the most extensive project that I've done since I've been here. It's work that I completed 6 months ago, I guess. It was a first edition Book of Mormon, 1830. It was in worst condition of anything I've seen. The pages were damaged. The cover was damaged. It appeared that it had gotten wet in, whether that was in water or some other liquid, I don't know. The leather on the cover had shrunk and wrinkled, and somebody had attempted to repair it. I mean, somebody with good intentions, I'm sure, but the repair they did wasn't the greatest. And whenever something has been repaired poorly before, it makes it that much more difficult for us to repair today. So this book was important not only because it was a first edition, but it had belonged to Vienna Jakes, who was an early member of the church, an early pioneer. She had given all her money, everything she owned, to the church. And Russ can tell you more about that because he's done some research on her. Just
$1,400.
Yeah, $1,400. She was promised that she would be taken care of the rest of her life. I think it's amazing that, she's mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants, section 90, verse 28. She's one of 3 women mentioned in the Doctrine and Covenants, which I think is pretty significant. The other 2 women were Emma Smith and Eve. So that put her in pretty good company. And on top of that, it's written on the front page of the book, the Vienna Jakes book, November 22nd, 1832. Is that right? But right below that, it says the writing above is Joseph Smith's own handwriting, which he wrote the day he gave the book to me.
Wow.
So Vienna Jakes' name is written in Joseph Smith's handwriting, and that makes this book even more valuable. If it had been any other first edition, they might not have asked me to do the repair because we have others that are in good condition. But because this had Joseph Smith's handwriting, it was decided that this deserved heavy-duty treatment, which meant taking the book completely apart, washing the pages, repairing tears throughout the book, and sewing the pages back together again, gluing them back together again, rebuilding the cover by adding new leather, but not by taking away any of the original parts, because the goal is to save as much of the original as possible. And now the book is pretty solid, pretty stable. It's able to be handled without feeling like it's going to fall apart in your hands.
These steps that you went through, you just tossed off so casually to those of us who don't understand anything about this. How do you wash a page and repair rips, etc.? I have Scotch tape at home, but that's not going to work for a Book of Mormon. No, and I wouldn't
use Scotch tape because that's one of those repairs that would be hard for us to repair later. To wash a page, we really immerse it in water, and that shocks a lot of people because they ask questions like, won't it wrinkle or won't it fall apart? And the answer is there's a chemical reaction that occurs when paper is made. It's cotton fibers or linen fibers beat to a pulp, and that pulp is floated in water, and then you slip a screen down into the water and pull the pulp up on a screen. And the water pours through the screen, leaving the pulp behind. The next step is to press the pulp flat into a sheet. And during that pressing process, there is a chemical bond that occurs between the paper fibers. And that makes the paper pretty stable, allowing us to immerse it in water. Now, this is usually the case. We have had cases where immersing things in water didn't quite work so well. Gave Russ a big headache a few years ago.
Did.
He actually had some newspapers that were falling apart in the water, and then he had to repair them. And so we had to find an alternative way to wash those. Anyway, we immerse them in the water, and yet, as you know, if you get paper in water and you try to pick it up, it's likely going to tear in your hands because it's wet. So we support it on polyester film it's a fibrous polyester film that allows the water to pass through it. And by handling that polyester film, that gives strength to the paper while we wash it.
I seem to recall some process where paper that is very acidic can be reversed or whatever through a similar process. What is that about?
Yeah, at least the acidity level in the paper can be reduced, and we can extend the life of the paper by deacidifying it. And if we're washing a document, the final bath that we put it through is an alkalizing bath. We use various chemicals, depending on the paper, to alkalize this paper, to neutralize the acid in the paper. There's already been some damage done because of the acidity. The fibers in the paper have been shortened, which makes the paper more brittle. But by alkalizing the paper, we can reduce the effects of the acid, strengthen the paper, and at least extend its life.
Very good. Thank you, Chris. Jennifer, any recent projects you want to tell us about?
Probably the one that comes to mind isn't necessarily very recent, but it was kind of fun. We received 2 samplers, and a sampler is an embroidery that was used to teach girls their alphabets, their numbers, and as well as the embroidery stitches that they would need to run a household. And we received 2 that came from the Cowdery family, and one was Louisa Cowdery's and the other was her grandmother's. And it was evident from looking at the 2 that her grandmother had used hers to teach Louisa on her sampler. So we have their education right there, which was kind of neat. But what had happened was both had been stored in a trunk for a very long time, and the wood is pretty acidic, and the acidity in the wood had gotten into the textile. So the samplers were both very acidic, very brown and soiled. And so the donor, before they brought it in, was doing what they thought would be a wonderful thing, and they washed it. But unfortunately, the embroidery yarns were dyed with an unstable dye, so all of the color bled out. So she stopped and did not wash her grandmother's. So when that came to us, I had the opportunity to try and wash the grandmother's. But because there were so many different colors that were not stable, and obviously not wanting the same thing to happen, I had to come up with another way to wash it. Now, if you just introduce water to something that is that soiled and acidic, what happens is the water pushes the dirt away, and you end up with little rings, or we call them tide lines, where you can see where the dirt all accumulated. So in order to get it clean, what I had to do was use small cotton swabs with purified water, and then I went over to Chris's lab, actually, and borrowed their suction table, which pulls air down through the bottom, and I was able to take one little piece of the sampler at a time, and that airflow allowed the water to dry fast enough that I didn't have tide lines that showed up. And so I could carefully go in between every stitch on the embroidery with that, with those little cotton swabs, and wash it that way.
So as the water goes through the top of the fabric, it's being pulled out the bottom, and it pulls the dirt and impurities with it.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good.
So,
Russ, any amazing photographs you want to tell us about?
I have several. Probably the one of the most interesting ones, because of its history, is a crayon print of the Joseph Millet and his wife. And Millet is one of the stories that's been used several times in conferences and whatnot for his faithfulness. And they come. A crayon print is a very large, usually about a 16 by 20 or about that size. When they made those, they made them it was a very light photograph, and then they enhanced that with charcoals or crayons or whatever they wanted to use, and drew in and shaded in the areas. Well, that was put on a very unstable board, and so the board had to be removed. So what I had to do is take a tool and gently go in between the board and the paper and remove that. Then wash the picture. Remove the rest of the board from the back of the picture, because we actually split that board. And then I removed the back of the board off because there was writing on it, and that's part of the history of the item. And actually attached a new core to that, and mounted them all together and made them as good as old, so that they're now stable and will be able to be viewed and used for many years to come.
When we talk about board, I think we should mention that we're talking about cardboard, not wooden board.
Yes, it was a kind of the same thing that you'd use to mount a photograph on today. Only the board that they used in those days, or the material that they used, was very acidic. It wasn't stable at all. So that has to be removed. You can wash it like that, but when it ends up, it usually ends up fairly brittle. So my choice was to remove it. It just depends on the item.
Sure.
What you do.
So for maybe to help the listeners with a visual, he basically removed the photograph side of the board and the back of the board, which had writing on it, and those became the bread of a sandwich, and he sandwiched a piece of archival non-acidic board between the photograph and the back.
To keep them, although they were both, shall we say, acidic or still unstable, that centerpiece helped stabilize both top and bottom.
Right.
And they were washed and deacidified just like we would any paper.
Very good. Let's move to some furniture. What have you been working on, Larry?
Well, as much for me in the conservation work, the replication or the reproduction of wooden furniture artifacts are just as rewarding or more rewarding than the actual conservation. And I just love to make missing parts to objects like drawers with dovetail joinery, or even missing metal parts. And these kinds of things present a challenge, and they're, for me, much more rewarding than just to keep a piece of furniture in a stable condition and to make sure that it's properly housed, and just so that it won't further deteriorate. But to actually take a piece of furniture and put it back into functional use, and even though it would only be for display, but to replicate the pieces that it needs, and to sometimes even replicate the whole object when that particular piece of furniture is beyond being used for exhibition. So I think to replicate artifacts in these furniture things is as much rewarding to me as anything else. And it's quite a number of skills are involved, and I think that really has been the challenge and the reward of working in the conservation field.
You know, Larry always sounds really humble. He seems to downplay what he does, and I think he really is. But if you could see the work that he does, he can take really intricate. If there's, say, a piece of a dresser or an armoire, and there's an intricate piece of wood that's on one side but it's missing from the other, he can copy that intricate pattern into another material and replace it on the other side of the furniture, and he does some amazing work.
Well, he's also, we're going to talk about Larry. Thank you. He's also done some really great pieces that the listeners probably can see because they're on display, like in Kirtland, in the sawmill, the altars for the Kirtland Temple. Larry worked on the replicas that are there so that people can see how that work took place. Or if you are in the Salt Lake area, you can come down to the museum, and we have an exhibit that has the tabernacle that's been up for a while, so people may have already seen it, and the truss work that has some of the original trusses and some new to create the display. Larry did that. So he's really has some wonderful things that are out there that the viewers could see.
Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Let's, for a second, suppose that one of our listeners happens to find an old chest, their great-great-grandmother, and happens to find an old historical book of some type. What should they do? I mean, sure, start showing their family and friends and take it on the road, and I don't know. What's the best option?
Well, I'd like to tell a story that maybe Russ can help me with about what not to do. we have a lot of horror stories about.
I'm sure that's exactly what I'm getting at.
Things
here,
people have done incorrectly. There was a case. There was a family that they had some very valuable documents. In fact, they were Wilford Woodruff.
Wilford Woodruff's
Wilford Woodruff letters between Wilford Woodruff and his wife Phoebe while he was on his mission. And the way they got these documents was somebody in the family had died, and there was a chest, and it was full of linens, doilies.
It was linens that the wives of Wilford Woodruff had accumulated, and the women were invited in to split those up, to take those, which they did. When they finished that, they there was a bunch of letters and papers and whatnot, and they left them in this wooden box because nobody wanted them.
And didn't they take them out to the curb for the
garbage man? They dragged them out to the curb for the garbage
no.
man, and they sat at the curb for the garbage man, and this lady's mother just couldn't stand that. So she went out and drug the chest back in, the box back in, and kept it. After she passed away, the letters were then split up between the children. The first installment was the one lady brought them in. There were 27 letters. They we looked at them. Chris assessed them, and we decided that we would do the work on them if they would let us copy them, which they were gracious enough to do. After we finished that work, the lady said, "Would you be interested in doing this for my two brothers who have the other 2/3 of the collection?" All in all, we collected over 100 documents that were Wilford Woodruff written during the time before and after the martyrdom of Joseph Smith, filled in a great big gap in church history. But they were destined for the garbage can.
So it's hard to point a finger and say these people did the wrong thing because they were just not aware of what was there.
Absolutely, and that happens a lot. In this case, they were able to, we did the work for them. That's not something we normally do. But because they were valuable items and because they allowed us to copy them, we did
kind of
this
an
work
exchange
for them.
situation.
Yes.
But what we recommend to individuals that find other documents that are of value is that before they do anything, they talk to a conservator who can give them good advice. And they're welcome to contact us. We are working on putting an Ask a Conservator link on our church history website. It's not up yet, but there is an Ask a Librarian link, and questions can be funneled to us through that Ask a Librarian link.
And so if someone had something that was non-church related, would they still be able to?
They could still contact us. And they could also, some of the best places to contact our local, if they are, wherever they are in the world, if they are near a library or a museum, they can contact them and find out if they have any conservators who can give them advice.
Very good. What are some other interesting artifacts you've seen and touched and you can tell us about?
My favorite is a photograph that, as you look at a photograph and you look into it, you start to see the story develop. First off, you just see the photograph. And this one was of a bunch of black cows. And I thought that was kind of weird that the church had this collection of black cows. They were it was in a city setting. There were some buildings around. And then I noticed that these black cows were all pretty much the same size. And I thought that was kind of interesting. And as I looked a little bit further, I noticed that the ground was muddy and that they had some planks down and that those cows were standing on those planks. 4 feet on one plank and the hind on the other. I thought that was pretty good. They had trained them to do that. And then I realized that it was a foundry, and that they were the castings of the temple oxen. But it took me a while to develop that whole picture as I went through there in my mind to see what it was. I've always thought it was quite interesting that those were the actual oxen that were used in the construction of the temple.
I'm working on I think it's interesting today. It's related to the one Russ discussed earlier, the Joseph Millet photographs. Currently, the Church History Library has a video that you can watch, which is somewhat of an orientation to the library, but it tells the story of Joseph Millet. And if anyone hasn't seen that, it is available on the Church History Library website, which is churchhistorylibrary.org. This story is told of a man, Joseph Millet, who is just an ordinary member of the church. He's not an apostle or one of the presidents or anything like that. And it's a time when the people are running low on food, and a neighbor comes to Joseph Millet for food, and Joseph Millet gives him the food. And the neighbor tells Joseph Millet that the Lord told him specifically to go see Joseph Millet. And that made Joseph Millet feel like the Lord actually knew him. And he wrote in his journal how good it made me feel to think the Lord knew there was such a person as Joseph Millet. So he preserved this experience in his journal. And on top of that, his daughter copied excerpts from his journal, including that part of the journal. And that journal, Mary Jane Millet's copy of Joseph Millet's journal, is sitting on my desk. That's one of the items that I'm working on right now. So Joseph Millet preserved it by writing it down. Mary Jane preserved it by making a copy, and now we are preserving it in the Church History Library by my doing the conservation work on it, which is similar to what was done with the first edition, although I couldn't wash the pages of this one because the ink was water-soluble. But I could repair the pages, and it's been sewn back together, and all it needs now is a little bit of glue and to have the cover rebuilt and reattached.
But not Elmer's glue.
Not Elmer's glue, no. We use a wheat paste, which is a reversible glue, so that if something should happen in the future, a future conservator can undo my work.
I see.
The interesting part of that history, too, is that Joseph Millet's journal, we don't know where it is, but we do know where Mary Jane's is. And so by her preserving some of those stories, we're able to go back to him. His father was Artemus Millet, and I believe that he had something to do with the plastering of the temples in both Kirtland and Nauvoo. So they passed a lot on through their family, through the goodness that they did. He went on Joseph Millet went on a mission when he was 20. He was called by Brigham Young, and he went to Nova Scotia. And so it's kind of interesting to once we see the history, and we are really not historians, and so. But you kind of get interested, and you start looking up the history so that you know a little bit about what you're working on. So it's a wildly fascinating job.
I find it humbling to have this book on my desk, to think that Joseph Millet cared enough to write it down, and that his journal is, I wouldn't say lost, I'd say we don't know where it is, but that his daughter took the care and the time to copy it. And I feel like I have to give that book the best treatment possible so that Mary Jane's effort is not wasted, so that this book can last for, to bless the lives of not only the Millet family children, but my children, so that they can hear this story that the Lord knew who Joseph Millet was, and perhaps realize that the Lord knows who they are as well.
I'm fairly certain I've heard that Joseph Millet story in General Conference a time or two. That's an inspiring story. And it makes me think that his daughter may have also felt similarly, doing what she was doing, copying the pages so that it could be preserved. So
I wonder if she felt something like Nephi felt when he was copying what Lehi had written before him, to maintain that history that his father had written.
Let's talk a little bit about what our listeners at home can do to preserve their own family treasures, their own artifacts, so to speak. Their scrapbooks, the things that they want to preserve of their children, etc.
All right, I'll start. The first thing I always tell people is storing items properly is the easiest and the best thing that can be done.
Can I jump in?
Yeah.
I would say the first thing would be to, well, at least from a textile perspective, stop using it.
That's true.
We get a lot of things in that, my kids used this for so many road shows growing up, or, we used these, whatever textile it may be, and I got a cut and bled on it. Now what do I do? Or, things like that. And if you want to use it as a vintage item for Halloween or whatever, that's fine. But if you want it to be a family keepsake, then stop wearing it.
Yeah. And I guess you have to
and
decide.
And then store it properly.
Yeah, you have to decide what's important. For example, there's the kitchen table that I grew up sitting around is at my sister's house, and she and her family use it. But it gives them an opportunity to talk to the kids about my mother and why she loved this table and why she bought it. But if they wanted to keep it as a keepsake, Jennifer's right. They should stop using it. But then I think storage is the easiest way. And in the museum and the library, we have controlled environments. We control humidity and and temperature and light levels. And in the home, you can only do so much of that.
Are you trying to tell me my crawl space is not temperature controlled?
Well, it's probably not. and it depends on where you live. In Utah, basements seem to be an okay place to store things unless you have a flood. But in Ohio, where I was born, basements usually are pretty humid, and you don't want to store things in there. So the advice that I try to give people is store things in as cool a place and as dry a place as possible.
And stable.
Stable, yeah.
Yeah, I would say acid-free archival boxes are a good thing to invest in. I know for textiles, a common mistake is everybody says, "Oh, my mom's cedar chest. That's the perfect place to put
the worst
my textiles."
Place, yeah,
it's really not, because the cedar is acidic, and so you'll end up kind of with the same problem that the samplers had. They'll get very acidic.
Yeah.
But if you get some archival, if that's the place you have to store them, and you get some archival boxes, that could create a microenvironment and a buffer in between. Or you could find somewhere else to store them. But having that...
Jennifer mentioned the word microenvironment, which simply means if you put an item in an archival storage container, there is an environment inside that container that's different than the environment in your home. It's not going to be that much different. It's going to stabilize to the same level that your home is. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that damages items is fluctuations in temperature and humidity. And by having an item in a box, you reduce the fluctuations around that item. It will still fluctuate. It will just fluctuate less drastically than the climate outside the box.
Right. And if it was, for example, your grandmother's doilies, and you have it in an archival acid-free box in your cedar chest, then the acidity in the cedar chest would have to get through that archival box before it got to your grandmother's doilies. So it would provide another layer of protection, although I do recommend just out of the cedar chest altogether.
As far as the photography goes, get good archival pages, the plastic pages that you buy now. Make sure that they're archival, and please don't use the magnetic pages that they used to sell, and I think still sell some. They call them magnetic pages. They have the thin piece of plastic on the top of them and strips of glue that hold the photograph in place. Those are death to your photographs. After a number of years, you'll notice that paper starts to discolor. That's because it's really bad, and glue is a bad thing on the backs of those photographs. The photographs by nature are acidic, and so that doesn't help to add that glue to them.
Additional acidity. You don't want to add any anymore.
Yeah, they're already bad. Then and if you can't get them out of there, call me, and I'd be happy to talk to you and tell you how to get them out. There are ways, and I don't want to go into that here because I'd have people doing bad things to them. But I'm happy to talk to them and look at them and explain how they can get those off of there. But just very, very good, and don't store them together. Together meaning face to face or even back to face. Have that barrier in there, that plastic barrier, that film in there, because one will affect the other. If a photograph has been a perfect example of that is that the newspapers didn't finish theirs correctly. They finished them only long enough so that they went to press, and then they so they weren't fixed properly. Now they go brown and go funny. If you've got them stored with photographs that have been correctly maintained, they will affect the others. So when you put them in these envelopes, these pages that have pockets in them, just one photograph per pocket, please. That way, it'll allow you to see what you've written on the back of the photograph. The other thing is that please write on the backs of your photographs what they are.
But use a proper photo marking pen or pencil.
Photo marking pens are available in specialty stores. You can also use a real soft pencil and not any pressure, because it'll break the emulsion on the other side.
In fact, it's good to write around the edges on the back of the photograph instead of in the center.
Yeah, please be careful with that. But write on them, because unborn generations do not know who Uncle Ned is, and if you just write Uncle Ned on there, they're not going to know. So you need to tell a little bit about the history of the photograph, also the date, when and where it was taken, a little explanation, so that now you have a story instead of just a picture of somebody standing in front of a building that you don't know where it is.
Russ, what about negatives and film?
Negatives, they also make storage pages for negatives for the film. One of the saddest stories I ever heard was when I was working in the photo industry in the stores. We had somebody coming in that was separating, and they each wanted copies of the photographs. The woman brought in several dozen photographs. She wanted me to make color negatives. The color negatives were quite expensive to make. They also don't make the very best prints. And I said it would be a lot easier and a lot less expensive if you'd bring me the negatives. And she says, the first thing I do is throw those away when I get home. I says, no, you should throw the prints away and keep the negatives. So always maintain the negatives, and I would maintain them in a different place. I'd put them in a different storage container, so that they're apart from the originals.
And not the cedar chest.
And not, oh please, not the cedar chest. And so far as temperature goes, if it's color, the colder the temperature, the better the storage. But at least somewhere where it's real stable, and the temperature moderate.
So here we've been basically dissing cedar. Larry, what do you have to say for that?
Well, as for wooden antique furniture or period furniture, it goes through the same degradation process as any other of the other things we've been talking about today. Those of you who like to have antique furniture or older furniture, many of the same things, such as your environment at home, if you have it in a living room with light and humidity and of course temperatures, all of that still affect wooden furniture. One of the greater problems that I have with my furniture is that I have children that have grown up over the years and have taken their turn at using the furniture as well as we have, and sometimes now that we have grandkids, we now are really working hard to protect our furniture. So, along with the light and the humidity, and you have the environment of I guess family and people that use your home is also a consideration. So there needs to really be a balance in your collection or in your furnishings that you basically want to use it, but you want to try and take care of it. So you would naturally try to inhibit the light from it by using a film over your windows, cut down on the light. You would put protective coverings over your surfaces, wooden tables, and maybe glass doors that are old and wavy that might end up with a broken glass because of a chair bumping into it or whatever. So I find for myself, I found ways in which I could protect the furniture by covering it and being sensitive to it. But I think to have the furniture is the collectible things. For me, it is a balance, and I don't like to store it. I like to use it, and so I try to protect it as I have it in my home. So, like I've said, it's just basically the same things that cause the degradation of furniture as any other of the things in the material world. So that's about the best advice I can give, except for maybe the polishing of it. So, or just, we don't want to say polishing, we just wax things these days because it's proven that over the years in old processes where oil was used by museums in years past have found that all it does is darken it, and then it deteriorates the finish. So waxing is all we do anymore to protect wood furniture finishes.
I don't know if you could tell from that, but Larry doesn't just take care of the furniture at the museum, but he's a furniture collector. He loves furniture. And I think that's true for all of us. We all love, my hobby is bookbinding when I'm at home. So I repair books at work, and then I make books when I go home.
My hobby is photography. I have a dark room at home. I do my own black and white work, and always has been for 47 years.
I wear clothes every day.
Very good. Very good. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our listeners?
I would. I have a couple of thoughts. We've mentioned a few times that we're not historians, but we all believe in history. I mentioned earlier the story of Joseph Millet affecting my children in the future, and I believe that one of the great things about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is that it maintains its history, that we know the origins of the church, and we know the experiences of the members of the church, and I think that's why the Lord asked us to keep a history. I refer back to several scriptures on a regular basis that tell us that we should preserve a history. In Doctrine and Covenants 47:1, it says, "Behold, it is expedient in me that my servant John," meaning John Whitmer, "should write and keep a regular history." He wasn't just commanded to write the history, but he was commanded to keep it, which can also mean to preserve it. And I think that at various times, all of us, all of the conservators that work for the church, have felt that that spiritual prompting that we should be preserving what we do. Russ mentioned that, or Jennifer mentioned that she was inspired to move into conservation, and I feel like the same way.
Without even knowing it.
Yeah, and Russ, well, when Russ was hired, I was asked if I would be willing to hire him, and in my mind I thought, oh, just another person who thinks they can do my job, which is sort of a sad statement about me. But I went home and I prayed about it and felt this strong feeling that Russ should be hired to be a photograph conservator, and that tells me that the Lord really cares about history being preserved, because he's putting the right people in the right places to make sure that happens.
Which also tells us that individuals and their families should be doing something similar.
That's really true. Something that we say a lot, and I hear people in the church history department say a lot, is that the history of the church is the history of its people. And while we can't possibly collect every member's history in the church history library or in the church history museum, we can help members know how to preserve their own history. And that's one of the things that we are actually charged with, is to find ways to reach out to the members and help them learn how to preserve their history. And we've done a little of that. I think the members of the church can look for more in the future, more of us reaching out to them and telling them how to preserve their histories. Another thing that we do, a way that we can capture the history of the members, is by capturing the history of wards and stakes. So ward and stake histories are really valuable, and they come into our collection and we store them, and they are referred to from time to time by people who are writing histories.
Well, and I would add to that usually when we think about keeping our personal history, we sit down with a piece of paper and we start writing our life story, and that's a wonderful thing to do. But I would also advocate that saving those artifacts that go along with that story are equally important.
And writing the stories about the artifacts.
And writing the stories about the artifacts, absolutely. I mean, even if you look at the Book of Mormon, when Joseph Smith found it buried in the ground, it was not just a book. There were artifacts there, too. You know, the Sword of Laban was there, and the Urim and Thummim, and things like that were kept all throughout the Scriptures. And I think that, and maybe it's just my personal interest speaking, but to me, when I look at the dress my great-grandma wore, it's more of a connection to me, and it helps me to visualize her more and to feel that connection to her story more than if I was just reading her personal history, which is wonderful, and I enjoy reading that too. But seeing the actual things that she talks about, gives me more of a personal connection to her and her legacy.
We've kind of said this, but it seems like priceless church artifacts once started out as just a family item.
That's right, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's more reason for individuals to really take care of their things.
Right.
And maybe even, kind of a chore like the samplers. Was Louisa Cowdery really excited to learn her sampler, or was it like her homework, And I don't know, but sometimes those things that you don't really put a lot of stock in now, your generations to follow will put stock into, so.
I don't think any of us think that our story is important or remarkable in any way. But generations come and go, and as that happens, and we see these stories from our ancestors, we realize that just a really simple act is so important to the history and our history.
I think you're right, Russ. And I think having worked for church history and talked about people's stories so much, I've started telling my story to my children to both to entertain them and to teach them. And I not only tell my stories, but I'm telling my parents' stories and my grandparents' stories, things that I never thought to do before. But now my kids, when we get around their friends, they say, "Dad, tell them the story about this or that." Mm-hmm. And that means they're going to be telling those stories to their kids. Yeah. And just perpetuating the history. Well, and it's also affected, at least for me, the way I record those stories, and it's expanded out. I have things that I probably, before I worked here, never would have kept, but now that I've seen, different artifacts in a different perspective, I think, maybe this this dress I have, or this, I'm a textile person, but, maybe this thing would be interesting for my kids, and maybe it won't too, but, there's things that I've kept that I might not have otherwise, because I can see how the story can inspire.
We've been talking with conservators Chris McAfee, Jennifer Hadley, Russ Furman, and Larry Montgomery from the Church History Department today. And we're grateful that you've been here today.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been fun.